get started by initially going to stripe.com. Now, Stripe is going to really help you out here because we're able to use a combination of both the button way of doing things as well as a full backend API. There's tons of documentation, but it can look a lot like Greek. So let's kind of go through it and work our way into how to research and how to find out what we need to send and what we need to get back by doing a combination of button and API. So you can go here and start by doing a sign up, which will take you to the register page. I already have an account, so I'm actually going to switch over and just go right to the documentation. Now, the documentation has a lot of information, but we're going to focus on one particular thing, which is the Stripe checkout itself. So the Stripe checkout is going to let us use a test card number to try things out without actually charging anyone. You can actually use any name, address you want, and you can see how the customer data is going to come in and be utilized by Stripe. Let's take a look at the different ways they do integration. So we're going to focus on simple. So it's really saying all you have to do is create a very, very simple button here, or a simple form with some JavaScript in it. But we have to have a few key things in order to use it from within PHP. So they provide a quick PHP guide, so we're going to use that as a bit of a reference and then build it out ourselves. So at the very bottom of this page, and scroll all the way to the bottom, you'll see it says guides, and that we have a checkout integration guide for several platforms. For us, we're going to use PHP. So I'm going to command click over here, go to PHP, and here is the checkout and PHP guide. Now, PHP provides a full Stripe library, which we're going to want to use because that way we can fully integrate whatever we want to do with the data coming back from the checkout system. So let's start by getting our PHP Stripe library. Okay, so let's click on that, and that's going to download a zip file for us. Click on it, should unarchive it for you and take us directly to our downloads folder. Now it says Stripe PHP and then the actual version number. We're gonna pare this down a little bit and just call it Stripe. And then I'm going to place that over in our actual developer root. So let me switch over and do that now. Okay, so here I have my little sandbox site set up. If we look here in our web, we'll see we have our index.php file that just says hello there. We can look at that in Sublime. Okay, and here we have our PHP hello there and nothing really else in the folder. Switch back over to Finder, and then we're going to take that information and just bring it over to our sandbox. Okay, so now we have our Stripe folder and our web folder. I'm actually going to put this in a new folder and call it vendor. And then bring the Stripe folder into vendor. Okay, everything else we need to do, we can do inside of Sublime Text. So here we have Stripe and all of the information here. All right, now let's switch back over to the demo information and see what it says to do next. So here we're going to create a file called config.php, and then we're going to set up our initial configuration. So I'm going to copy this code here from the page, and then go back over to Sublime and create our config file. And I'm going to create that directly in our web folder. Okay, so here we have a file that has nothing but PHP. So the first thing we're going to do in order to keep with standards is remove that final question mark. Save our file and then take a look. So it's going to require the libstripe.php, and then we're going to set an array or a variable array called stripe with a secret key and a publishable key. Now this is the secret key that's just in the example, and as well as the public key that's in the example. We're going to change this to the API keys from our actual account, and then we're going to take the Stripe object, which we get from here, and then set API key, and then the actual value, which is our secret key. Okay, so first off, let's switch over to our dashboard from our Stripe account and figure out what our API keys are. So here you have my dashboard, which I am in test mode, and I have absolutely no data whatsoever in here so far. I'm going to go over to my account, click on it, and do account settings, and here API keys. And then under my API keys, you'll see I have a test secret key and a test publishable key. And then we have a live secret key and a live publishable key. Now, we want to make sure for now, while we're developing, we're always going to use our secret key from test and our publishable key from test. Switch back over to our code. This is going to be our secret key. Notice it starts with SK and test. And then you see we have our publishable key. Okay, so going from there, we're going to take a look at our require once. Now, this is including our local folder and expecting it to be in the lib and then Stripe PHP. That's not the case. For us, we're in a folder above this, above our web folder, which is where our config file is located. And then we're in the vendor folder, then another Stripe folder, then the lib, and then you'll see Stripe PHP. So we need to do that by doing a reference to a folder back. Then we're going to go into the vendor folder. Then we're going to go into a Stripe folder. Then lib and Stripe PHP. So here we'll see require once, one folder up, so that would be heading up into our root folder, then down into the vendor folder, then down into our Stripe folder, that's right, and then a stripe.php. Okay, so that should work. Let's head back over to the guide and take a look what's next. So here we are including Stripe's PHP library, and then we need to create a form. Okay, so let's just copy this data here and see what we get. So we're going to copy over this information, which you'll see we're going to paste into our index file. So paste that in here. And then you'll see we're requiring once our config file, which is in the local folder, config PHP, so that should be good. And then we have a simple form, and then we have a script tag, which has a source to the Stripe.js file. Then we have a class of Stripe button. Then the data key, which is our publishable key, which is what we've concluded here in our config file. And then the data amount, which is 5,000. Now that's not $5,000. When you configure an amount to go directly into the JavaScript button, that's done in pennies. So that would actually be $50. And then data description for 1 year's subscription. I'm going to clean up this HTML a little bit, make it look a little bit nicer. Save that, and then switch back over to our index file and see what we end up with. Okay, so we've got a little bit of an error here. So we are unable to open the stream. It can't actually find the vendor Stripe lib. So let's take a look what we get. Looking at our config, which it's giving us our error is on line 2 in our config. And we're going vendor Stipe lib, so that won't work. So let's type in Stripe. Spelling, it's key, obviously. All right, hit refresh. Okay, great. So now we have a simple button that just says Pay with Card. Now, so far you might be thinking this is the same thing as PayPal, right? Well, it's really not. It's a lot more advanced and a lot more involved. It seems simple on the surface, but we have a lot of configuration options. We're not just pasting in code and seeing how it works and just getting whatever we get. We can do full configuration of this button. But let's see what it does to start with right now. So I'm going to click on Pay with Card and see what happens. Okay, so you see we get a nice modal pop-up, which is nothing to do with your site locally. All of this is taken care of remotely. So it's not insecure in any way because there's nothing that's being handled on your side. This is all server-side code. You also notice that there is a large test mode button in the upper right-hand corner, and so let's click on the button and see what we get. That gives us our testing card numbers. That's really cool. Good feature. We're going to need to know those. So I'm actually going to copy one of these. We'll just do a Visa. Copy that. Switch back over. Enter in an email. So let's do bob@vila.com. And then paste in our test card number. And then how about an expiration date that is not going to work? So let's see, 01/2013, and then a CVC, which is our 3-digit security code, and then hit pay. Now, if you noticed, it gives us a nice little wiggle, tells us, okay, this is not going to work, and then highlights red that this is a false or poor expiration. It's going to provide validation for us on all of this, which really takes a lot of the work out of our hands. It's going to allow us to focus on just the user experience on our own website. And this is not taking away from any of the experience of your site by moving you to another website, say for instance, PayPal. So let's actually enter in a value that's correct and see what we get. All right, hit pay $50 and see what it does. Okay, success. And then it heads to charge.php, which we're not doing anything. So let's create a charge.php and look at the actual data that's coming back or being passed in to charge.php. So I'm going to go over and create a new file, and we're going to save this as charge.php. Save that file. Let's head back over to the demo and see what it tells us we want to do. All right, so here's our checkout guide. We're going to go down and we'll see, okay, here's a good amount of data. So let's copy all of this in, and then I really want to eliminate this so we can see how to better examine the code that's coming back. So paste in our values, paste in our data, and remove this bottom one because it's only PHP, no HTML. And let's see what it's doing. It's requiring the local file wherever this file is, so charge.php. It is going to be in the same folder, which is good, and then we're going to pull in config.php, which is in the same folder. So that should be good. Now, when we get the data back, we're getting a value in the post called Stripe token. Now, token doesn't really mean a lot to us, so let's look at the documentation and see what a token actually is. Okay, so here we're on the Stripe API reference itself. I've gone ahead and switched over to PHP. When you start, it actually might start off on just curl, but for us, we're using the PHP library. This is going to give you a lot of info. You really do need to actually read all of this, and then scroll down, and we're going to find out what is a token. So let's go to the very bottom here. You'll see token, and let's click on that. Okay, so this says you want to be able to charge credit cards or send payments to bank accounts without having to hold sensitive card information on your own servers. Huge benefit, because you don't want to have to keep that data, that possible leak of data, on your own servers. So when you send off a card to Stripe, it returns back to you a token. And that token allows you to pass it throughout all of the Stripe API, and it's basically a value that equates to a card that's been authorized for a particular amount. So that's great for us. So what's the next step after we have a token? Well, let's switch over and see what an actual token itself looks like. So I'm going to comment out all of this for the moment and just inspect or var dump our token. All right, let's see what we get. Okay, so you see it's just a nice string, starts with TOK, and that's what we're going to pass back and forth through the Stripe API in order to actually create customers and charge an actual card. So let's go back to our code and see what they're wanting to do next. So you can see here the very next thing we're going to do is we want to create a customer. There's tons and tons of options. But for now, we just really want to create an email itself to show the customer's email address, and then the actual card or the token itself that's stored with that customer. Now, you can use whatever email you want. Maybe they have an email they use for billing that's completely separate. So we can pull this from our post data, or we can enter in something that was maybe coming from our form that we had them fill out, or the user data that we have as maybe a user in our account or our online accounts. So for now, I'm just going to leave it as a string for customer@example.com, and then we're going to pass through the token. It's going to return back to us a customer, which I want to actually var dump the customer value at this point. Okay, so let's resubmit our form data and see what we get now. Okay, a lot of information here, pretty cleaned up, but as you can see, it's an object. So this is converted to a PHP object. So back again, we're to object-oriented code. And then we have a set of protected values, which is our actual customer data itself. Then we have our API key, which is our test key that's passed back and forth. So we really can't access any of this data because it's protected. We could use some PHP magic methods, but we want to take a look further into an object. What can we do with an object in PHP? So let's take a look at a PHP function that will help us look further into objects. So here we have a PHP function called getClassMethods. So it's really going to return back to us the functions or object-oriented code methods of a particular class or an object. So it takes a mixed, so it takes either a class name or an object itself. So let's run this function, getClassMethods, on the customer and see what we get back. So we're going to go in here and do getClassMethods, and I'm actually going to var dump that as well. All right, now let's take a look. Okay, so the error we got here is the uncaught exception. So we should be using a try catch block to make sure that we're not getting any exceptions, but for just testing it out and exploring here, we can just sort of go further and look at what the error comes back as. So it says here you cannot use a Stripe token more than once. So this is our token. We've already used it to create a card on the customer object itself. So we're actually going to have to go back and resubmit and create a new customer. So let's do that now. Okay, so we're going to refresh the page, pay with card, create a new customer. So we'll do Roy at Underhill.com and do another card, which is our 4-2 card. And then 01/2016, 123. Again, we're saying pay $50, and we click on it. And there we go. So we've gone back to charge.php, but now we've dumped out all the methods that are here and available for us. So taking a look through the methods, we have quite a lot of stuff that we can do with the customer object itself from within the API. But really what we want to do is just take a look at the data or the information that's there in the actual object. So looking through this list, the first thing I see that pops out here is number 27, and that's the keys, which makes me think, okay, maybe there's a way for this to convert over to an array. So let's run this method, keys, on our customer object and see what we get. Okay, customer keys. All right, so now we're going to dump this out again, and if we do this, we're most likely going to get our error again. Yep, we do, so we need to start back over from the beginning. Refresh, pay with our card, and we'll do another one, so I'll do Hampton Team Treehouse.com, and then again, test number. 01/2016, then 123. Okay, so now here are the keys. ID, object, created, live mode. This is great. This is all of the data that we really want from the customer object that we've created. So you can see we can find out really any of the info on the customer object just by using an array type of access. Let's switch back over to our demo code and see what the next step would be in making the charge actually happen. So I'm going to remove this information here. And then let's take a look at the next line. So we'll see charge. Okay, so here we're saying, all right, we want to create a charge object or a Stripe charge object. We're going to use a customer as a reference. We're going to pass through our amount that we want to charge in pennies, and then the actual currency, which is US dollars. What you're noticing here, if you are noticing this, is that the string, the pay $50 that was in the actual JavaScript button, is only as a reference. It's not actually charging the customer. It's only passing through a value, making sure the card is valid and making sure we can charge that customer that amount of money. The charge itself is completely up to us how you're handling it. So again, much more flexible than just a button type of system. So let's go ahead and go through and charge the customer $50 and then echo out, hey, we've successfully charged $50. So we're going to need to, again, start over from the beginning here and refresh our page, pay with card, and go through our normal process. And pay $50, see what happens. Okay, successfully charged $50. Looks great. Now, how do we verify this through our accounting type of system? Well, we can do that with the Stripe dashboard. So let's take a quick look over at the Stripe dashboard and see what we get. So I'm going to hit refresh here. And we have a total of 4 customers in our system now and a total volume of sales here of $50. So you can see here we can look at all kinds of information. Our payments, there's lots of graphs. Here's our actual token, a quick way for us to refund, disputed payments coming in. But really, let's take a look at our events and we can get lots more data here. So you can see starting with here in the very beginning going down through, you can see that customer@example.com was charged $50. We have creating new customers, so on and so forth. But notice it's using customer@example.com. It's not actually using the email that the person entered. Again, this is all based on how you want to handle it when you get to the back end of the API itself. So let's take a look at our customers. Okay, so here we have the actual email that goes through with the card. We have our customer ID itself. If we take a look at each one of the customer's information, you can see the Visa that's on file. Again, secured information. It's keeping it here. It's only showing you the last 4. Whether it passed the CVC check, do you want to delete the card? Can you add a card for a customer? Any of these things are very possible. Very nice UI, very simple and easy to use. Okay, let's go back to sandbox.dev, and here we have pay with card. This is great, but maybe we want to have a little bit more configuration options to our pay with card button. So let's go over to the checkout itself and see what we're actually able to do with the checkout button. So I'm going to close all this out and just take a look at the checkout page. So scrolling down, you can see we have a simple pay with card button and uses a Stripe token. Here we have full custom, so we can actually use a full jQuery or JavaScript handling to all of this, so we can get extremely custom with it. But for now, again, let's just stick with simple and see what our options are, things that we can actually change on the card. So here's our configuration options. So we've got data key, which we're passing through, the tokens, what's coming back. Now, data image, data name, data description, data amount. Let's see what we can do when we add these things in. Data name, company name, or the website. So let's add that into our markup and see what we get. Head back over to our index.php file and add in a couple of new things. So here's data name equal to my widget factory. Save that and refresh. Let's see what our button looks like now. There, it says My Widget Factory. Gives you a nice title. 1-year subscription, so let's see what that was. Here is the data description. I'm going to move this down to a different line just for clarity. And Let's say, what are you buying? You are buying magic. Refresh, pay with card, quick, easy. Everything here is sent to their server and then put into their markup, which that looks good. What else can we do with this? Data image. Okay, so a relative URL to something that you've got there. You can also use full URL. So let's do that and find ourselves an image here. So switch back over to our markup and then data image, and we're going to give it some sort of image. Now, what is it asking for? Something that's about 128 by 128 pixels. Let's do a real quick Google search. Okay, this one's pretty big, but let's see what it does with it. Paste that in, hit save, and let's refresh this and hit our pay with card button. Pretty cool. So you can see it's kind of stretching it out or squashing it a little bit, so you definitely want to keep to the size that they want, but a much cleaner, and you see a branded bit of added code here. Now, this is great. We can change this number here. Remember Me Everywhere is a service within Stripe. That's something that's wonderful. But I want to do one last little thing, and that's change this Pay with Card button. So I wanted to say something other than Pay with Card. Let's see if there's a real quick option for doing that. Here we have Data Panel Label. So that's good. Data Billing Address, whether or not we want that. Yeah, let's actually add a couple of these in here. So data panel label, actually data label, that's what we want. So let's do data label. And then buy some magic. Save it, refresh. Sweet, that's easy. Okay, last little thing that we'll do, let's say we want them to specify a shipping address, so or a billing address. Let's just do shipping and billing. So we'll do data shipping and data billing, and we'll add that to our code. It's telling us our value here needs to be true or false. So we'll go back over to our code, add equal true, and same here. Now let's see what we get. All right, definitely a whole different form. So we've got same billing and shipping. We can enter in our name, street, zip. All of this gets added to our customer data, which is great for us. It's up to you whether or not you want to require it. It's not necessarily needed unless you choose to do that for authorization, which can be set up on the Stripe website. So if we don't have same billing and shipping, nice UI here, two completely different screens for shipping and billing. Then once you do this, it switches over to payment info. Again, great key here, validation. So it shows us what we actually need, and we didn't have to do any of this. So head on over to stripe.com, take a deeper look into this, and I hope this has given you a good base to get started working with and understanding the robust and flexible Stripe API. As always, if you have further questions about this or any other subject at Treehouse, feel free to ask in the forums. You can reach me on Twitter @HamptonPalk. Remember, work hard and have a little joy.